We just glued together the boards and it's been dried now, and if you notice on the top here, we need to clean it up, and also the edge of it has a bevel on it, and so we'll cut that bevel as well and cut it to size. And very first thing we need to do is scrape off any glue that's been dried up. Now, if you've wiped it up with a wet paper towel, usually you don't have to do this, but there might be some spots from the clamps. And again, make sure you're looking on both faces, because on the other face of this there's quite a bit of glue that did not get wiped up, and so we're going to use what's called a glue scraper to get all that glue off. Okay, our glue scrapers, we can find these in the tool cabinet, and when you scrape this glue off, you want to make sure you clamp your board down to the bench so it's not going to move on you. So I usually just take one of these hand screw clamps and just clamp it nice and firm. And then when you scrape this glue, you have to put quite a bit of pressure on here. So if you're just kind of gently scraping it, doesn't really do much. So you have to get a lot of pressure. Put that down, another hand on top, and pull back nice and firm. And you'll be able to scrape off any of those big chunks of glue. And we don't have to get 100% of it off. We're just trying to get all the big chunks. So take your time and scrape off any of that glue. We're looking pretty good here. On this side I have a little bit of glue where the clamp was at, so we can try to hit that side as well. Next, we need to go to the jointer and joint one edge of our board until flat. If you notice, we already jointed these edges of our board when we glued these together. However, when we put the clamps on them and put a lot of pressure, if you look closely, there's some ding marks from the clamp or other things. And so you're going to want to still go ahead and joint one of these edges until it's perfectly flat. I would get in the habit of marking the jointed edge with an X or something so that you know that that one's flat. Your other edge looks fairly flat, but we know that for sure this one is flat. That way, anytime we need to put our jointed edge against the fence, we can just see which one we jointed with that X marked there. So get in the habit of that with any time you run any board on the jointer, mark it with an X so you know that that was your flat jointed edge. Okay, next we're going to come to our panel saw. And this is where we're going to be trimming one end of this flat. If you notice, when we glued your boards together, as best we tried, the ends of these may not have lined up perfectly. And so we're going to be just trimming one end flat. This is too big to put on our upcut saw or the miter saw to make this cut, and so we are going to use our panel saw for this. And you're probably going to want to use this little middle shelf right here. If you lift this little silver part up, it'll help hold your board a lot easier up here. You're welcome to use down here. It just means you have to bend down a lot farther when you're making that cut. So I'd recommend you use this middle shelf right here where it can hold your board. On your panel saw, you can see where the blade's going to be cutting. You've got this little slit mark right here. And if you notice, to bring this blade down, the blade is inside this red casing right now, and we have to press these black handles forward all the way to get the blade to pop out, and then it will be pulled down, make your cut. Make sure after you make your cut you pull the handles away, and then you can lift it back up. So we don't need to take a whole lot off. We've got about 20 inches right now, and this overall dimension at the end needs to be 18. So I've got about 2 inches total, but understand we're taking a little bit off one side, and we're going to take a little bit off the other side as well. So I usually just trim off just about a ½ inch or so, just off one end of this. So I just eyeball it. I'm just going to look where that blade's going to be cutting. Just put my mark a little bit past that cut mark. And you definitely want to hold your board tight as you're doing this. And one suggestion is to hold it near the bottom part. If you hold pressure up the top, it tends to tip and fall. So get your pressure a little bit more on the bottom when you're holding onto that. Green button, we'll turn it on, and we'll again push those handles forward, make our cut down, and pull them back away on the way back out. So you can see we've just trimmed one end nice and clean and flat again on our panel saw. Okay, after cutting on the panel saw to 18 inches long, we need to get the width cut on the table saw to 12 inches wide. So we'll just go ahead and set our fence to 12 inches and make this cut. You do want to put that jointed flat edge against the fence, and I have marked it with an X after I jointed it so I know that that's my jointed edge. So when you set your fence to 12 inches here, lock that down, that flat edge will go against the fence. Again, double check things like your blade height. Make sure that's just a little bit above your board on those. Also, we want to make sure you have push sticks if you need it. However, this one is set at 12 inches, and so my rule is anything 6 inches or less use a push stick. With it 12 inches, we're just fine to not use the push sticks and just use our hands. And so we just have to have our hands put pressure on this as we're making this cut. Flat edge against that fence. So we've trimmed our board 18 inches long on the panel saw and now 12 inches wide. The last thing we've got to do is get our thickness down on the planer and the sander. The next step is to come up to the planer and get the thickness of our board to 13/16 of an inch. We're wanting our first pass to be at 14/16, which is only removing a 16th at a time, and then our second pass we're going to flip our board over and run at 13/16 of an inch. So we're going to twist our stop button, hit that yellow program button, type in the decimal that we want, which is 14/16, 0.875. Hit the enter button, and then the flashing start button. That'll adjust our planer to the right height, and then we will go ahead and turn it on with the green main motor button, and we'll send our board through. Just a reminder on the time saver sander, we are starting at the thickness that we ended on the planer, so we're going to start at 13/16, which is 0.810, and then we're going to go all the way down to 3/4, which is 0.750, only 1/100th of an inch at a time. So we'll start at 0.810, then 800, 790, 780, 770, all the way down to 750. Making sure we go with the grain when we sand this, and also make sure we get both faces. Just a quick another reminder, if it doesn't turn on or doesn't let you turn anything on button-wise, you probably have to go turn on the air pressure, which is that red hose coming down all the way to the bottom. If you flip the switch up, you'll hear it. So now the air is turned on, so now it will allow us to turn this on and make some adjustments now. Just type in 810 start, should adjust to that first measurement, and then we're going to go 1/100th of an inch smaller each pass. Once you have your board to 3/4 of an inch thick from the time saver sander, you're going to come to the table saw here, and this is where we're going to add our bevel on the top. It'll be on all 4 sides of the board, and it's a 17-degree angle on our blade. And we're also going to be using this large exterior fence here. First thing you need to do is remove the guard from the table saw, because when we have our fence really close here, that guard gets in the way. And just to show you how to remove the guard, we're first going to lift up our little plastic guard cover there. Then there's a little silver tab right here. If you lift this up, the whole red throat insert will come out. And then inside the saw, there's a gray handle here, And there's also a little black door. If you push that, it'll just come open to give you more room for your hand to reach in there. And then there's this gray lever. You're just gonna lift that up. And now the entire guard assembly can just lift out of there. And anytime we remove the guard, we always want to replace it with a splitter. And I've got them hanging up down here on the side. It's just this little shark fin piece right here. And so that will just replace where that guard was at, right in there. You're gonna lower that gray handle, tighten that up, close that little black door. And then we need to reinsert our little red throat plate. Just making sure that it's nice and even everywhere. I can feel right here, actually, it lifts up and doesn't sit perfectly flat. And so we need to make sure this is perfectly flat all around. So I'm actually gonna put the tip of it in first and then the back part down. Now I can tell it's all the way flat all the way around. If you need help with that, let me know. And there's our splitter attached. To raise and lower the saw blade, we've known that that's that wheel in the front. And if you twist that, it'll raise or lower the blade. And we need to angle the blade to 17 degrees. If you also notice, there's a little red arrow and it has different angle measurements here. So we need to go to 17 degrees in order to tilt the blade. On the side, there's another handle, another wheel here. And if we turn this wheel, it will angle the blade. And so you'll just keep cranking this wheel. If you notice, that little red arrow is moving as you crank this, and we're gonna go all the way to 17 degrees. And they have half-degree increments, so there's 16 and a half, and there's 17 right there. So our blade is now angled 17 degrees. We have to attach our big external fence. These are just found underneath the table saw, and this actually just slips right on top of our fence itself here. So if you just lift this up on top, it just kind of hits right over top of it, and it should just kind of press down nice and tight, and that way our fence now has a big large area that you can put your board up against. On your green paper, it mentions that we need to set our fence to 1 7/8. Sometimes you just tap on it to get it moved over. So we're just gonna get this set exactly 1 7/8, lock that down. So this whole setup, if you need my help on it, let me know. And we're ready to now make that bevel cut. You need to understand that the bevel is going to be cut on the bottom side of your top. And so look at your faces and decide which face is your best looking. And we want your best looking face to go against our fence. So I'm looking at this face or this face. Maybe you like the knots or whatever reason. I'm going to go with this face. I like this one a little bit better. So I'm going to run this face against our fence here. And we need to run this 4 passes. So we'd run it this way, and then we're going to rotate our board and run it this way, and then rotate and do 4 different cuts on this. So you have to make sure it stays nice and tight on the fence. So my left hand is just going to be kind of putting pressure. Just don't have your hand too low where the blade's going to get in the way. And your other hand's going to kind of steady the board so it doesn't tip on you or come away from the fence at all. So we'll just keep it nice and tight as we run this on all 4 edges. Rotate that. We now have our top. It's been beveled on those bottom edges of your board here. It's a 17-degree angle. These little cutoff pieces here, don't worry about those. They're not going to shoot backwards or get in the way. Just kind of leave them there. Make sure that blade stops before you remove these. When you're done, we want to make sure, if there's no one behind you, to put our whole table saw assembly back to normal. So removing the fence here, be careful with it as you remove it. We need to make sure our blade gets tipped back to 0 degrees, and then our plastic guard assembly put back on. So don't forget to get your name on this, and I would write this on the bottom part, and then come get my signature when you're done.